We've got a whole stack of analyses here. It's dense stuff, but that's what we're here for.
To untangle it all, make sense of it.
Exactly. And our mission, to equip you with, well, a clear, unbiased understanding of the potential, challenges, strategies, no matter where you stand politically.
Exactly. And what's really striking is how intertwined all these economic issues are. I mean, trade wars, inflation, the labor market, that national debt, it's a tangled web.
Okay, I like that, a tangled web. So let's start with something many Americans really felt during the last administration, those trade wars and tariffs.
Yeah, the America First policies. Remember those tariffs on goods from China? They really shook things up. Supply chains disrupted, increased costs for businesses, and ultimately those costs passed down to, well, to us, the consumers.
Right, we all felt that. But the question is, what happens if those tariffs continue or even escalate in a new administration?
Well, one potential consequence is, reigniting those trade tensions. Imagine tit-for-tat tariffs, uncertainty in the markets, potential damage to relationships with key trading partners.
Not good. Not good at all. So bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. sounds good on paper, but is it realistic?
It's not a simple flip of a switch. Let's take pharmaceuticals, for example. Bringing drug manufacturing back to the U.S., that'd require huge investment in infrastructure, skilled labor, and that could drive drug prices even higher. Plus, we can't ignore the global implications, retaliation, further supply chain disruptions. It's a real possibility.
It's like a delicate ecosystem. You can't just tweak one part without affecting everything else. And speaking of delicate ecosystems, let's talk about inflation. That's been a real pain point for everyone.
Absolutely. And the Federal Reserve's been trying to tame it by raising interest rates. Imagine hitting the brakes on the economy, trying to slow things down, curb those rising prices. But that comes with its own set of consequences.
Right, because higher interest rates make it more expensive for businesses to borrow money, which can stifle investment and slow job growth. It's a real tightrope walk.
It is. To really grasp this balancing act, you have to look at the numbers. Current inflation, it's around 6%, way higher than the Fed's 2% target. And this persistent inflation, it's affecting everything. Groceries, housing costs, eating away at the purchasing power of so many Americans.
It's hitting people's wallets, that's for sure. And let's not forget about the national debt, which just seems to keep growing.
Right. High debt, it limits our future economic options. Think of it like a maxed out credit card. It reduces our flexibility. It makes it harder to respond to, unexpected situations.
Okay, that's a great analogy. Maxed out credit card, definitely understand that.
Yeah.
So what strategies could a new administration consider to tackle this?
One approach discussed is reducing government spending. Now, that doesn't have to mean slashing programs left and right. It could be about finding efficiencies within existing programs, streamlining bureaucracy, making sure taxpayer dollars are being used wisely.
So more strategic, making sure we're getting the most bang for our buck. I like that. But what about this idea of privatization?
Privatization. Yeah. Essentially, transferring government functions to the private sector. There are strong arguments on both sides. Proponents say private companies can often deliver services more efficiently and at a lower cost. But opponents worry about potential conflicts of interest and essential services becoming, less accessible to vulnerable populations.
It's a trade-off for sure.
Yeah.
Do any of the sources give specific examples of what could be privatized?
One source mentions air traffic control. The argument is a private company could modernize the systems, improve efficiency, fewer delays, potentially even lower costs for airlines and passengers.
Interesting. But critics say air traffic control is a critical safety function. It should stay under government control.
Exactly. It's a complex issue.
Very complex. We've got efficiency to consider, but also safety, accessibility, accountability, so many factors.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Another piece of this economic puzzle is the labor market. And right now, we're facing a labor shortage, especially in key industries.
We are. And it's interesting because during the previous Trump administration, there was a big focus on restricting immigration. But with this labor shortage, a different approach might be needed.
Right. And the sources suggest a new administration might need to consider a more nuanced approach to immigration, particularly for skilled workers. So instead of broad restrictions, maybe targeted visa programs designed to attract talent in high-demand fields, healthcare, technology, engineering, things like that.
Exactly. It's recognizing that immigration can actually benefit the economy by filling critical gaps in the workforce.
Right. It's not just about bringing people in. It's about investing in the American workforce, too, making sure Americans have the skills they need to compete.
Absolutely. The source material really stresses the need to invest in education and training programs. Think apprenticeships, vocational training, even partnering with companies to develop industry-specific programs.
Like building a pipeline of skilled workers.
Yeah.
But it's not just about, technical skills, right? It's also about things like adaptability, problem solving, critical thinking, the things machines can't do.
Exactly. And one source specifically mentions the need to revamp our education system, focus more on these transferable skills, collaborative problem solving, creative thinking, digital literacy. These are the skills that'll be in demand across a range of industries, regardless of technological advancements.
It's about preparing students not just for their first job, but for a lifetime of learning and adaptation. It's a big task, education reform, and just one piece of this giant economic puzzle.
For sure. And another piece is fostering innovation and entrepreneurship. The U.S. has always been a leader in innovation, but to maintain that edge globally, a new administration might need to focus on creating an environment where startups can thrive.
So what does that actually look like? What policies could they use to encourage innovation?
One suggestion is streamlining regulations to lower those barriers to entry for new businesses. Simplify the permitting process, cut red tape, make it easier for entrepreneurs to access funding.
Create a more business-friendly environment. Makes sense. But it's not just about creating new businesses, it's also about encouraging existing ones to innovate and expand.
Right, and one source suggests offering tax incentives to businesses that invest in research and development, encourage them to explore new technologies, develop new products, create jobs.
So it's about creating a win-win. Businesses benefit from innovation, the economy benefits from job growth. It's like planting seeds for future economic prosperity.
Yeah.
But as we talk about these strategies, it's important to remember that we're operating in a global context. The decisions a new administration makes won't happen in a vacuum.
Absolutely, and this global context is especially important when it comes to technology. The U.S. is in a fierce competition with other countries, especially China, for dominance in key technology sectors. Artificial intelligence, quantum computing, 5G, all of that.
Right, and these technologies are not just important for economic growth, they have national security implications as well. So how might a new administration approach this global tech race?
The sources suggest a multi-pronged approach. One element is increasing funding for research and development in these critical areas. This could involve grants for universities, partnerships with private companies, even creating national labs dedicated to cutting-edge research.
Investing in the future, making sure the U.S. stays at the forefront of technological innovation. But it's not just about government funding. The private sector plays a huge role in driving innovation too.
Absolutely. One source stresses the importance of fostering public-private partnerships to accelerate development and deployment of these technologies. Collaborative initiatives, where government agencies, research institutions, private companies, they all pool their resources and expertise.
Like a brain trust, the best minds working together. But it's not just about inventing new technologies, it's also about ensuring those technologies are used responsibly and ethically.
Right. And another source highlights the importance of developing clear ethical guidelines and regulations for these powerful technologies. With artificial intelligence, for example, we have to consider things like bias in algorithms, data privacy, the potential impact on jobs and the workforce.
We're in uncharted territory, incredibly powerful tools, but we have to make sure we're using them wisely and for the benefit of everyone. Okay, last but not least, a critical issue that a new administration will have to face: energy policy.
Definitely. It's a complex issue. Implications for climate change, national security, the economy, the whole 9 yards.
And the energy landscape has changed a lot in recent years. We see a global push for cleaner energy, but at the same time, energy prices are volatile, and the U.S. is trying to achieve energy independence. How do you balance all these competing priorities?
One source suggests a pragmatic approach that balances short-term needs with long-term sustainability goals. So encouraging cleaner fossil fuel technologies like carbon capture, but also investing in renewables like solar, wind, geothermal.
So it's not about picking one energy source over another. It's about creating a diverse energy portfolio. Like having a hybrid car, you can switch between gas and electric depending on your needs.
I like that analogy. And to make this hybrid approach work, we'll need significant investment in energy infrastructure. Modernizing the electric grid, building new transmission lines, upgrading pipelines, it's a big job.
It is. But it could create a lot of jobs, make the U.S. more energy secure, less reliant on foreign oil. Plus, it could help address the national debt, Speaking of which, we haven't forgotten about that. How could energy policy play a role in tackling the national debt?
Well, increased domestic energy production could generate more revenue for the government from leases, royalties, taxes. That could offset spending. And investing in renewables, that could attract private investment, create new industries, boost economic growth, and tax revenue.
Okay, so potentially more energy independence, a cleaner energy future, and a stronger economic foundation to tackle that national debt. It all ties together. But we've been discussing big strategies, and I think it's important to remember how this impacts everyday Americans.
Right. It's about people's lives, their jobs, their ability to provide for their families.
Exactly. So what are some concrete ways a new administration might address these workforce challenges?
One idea that keeps popping up is strengthening vocational training and apprenticeship programs. These programs provide hands-on training, giving workers the skills they need for good-paying jobs without needing a 4-year degree.
It's about providing options because college isn't the right path for everyone, and there are a lot of great careers that don't require a traditional degree.
Right. And these programs could be tailored to meet the needs of different industries and regions. So, for instance, in areas hit hard by manufacturing job losses, maybe programs focused on retraining workers for jobs in, say, renewable energy or advanced manufacturing.
It's about adapting to the changing economy, giving workers the tools they need to transition and succeed.
Exactly. And another idea is expanding access to affordable childcare and elder care. These are often big barriers for people, especially women, trying to enter or stay in the workforce.
Absolutely. If you can't afford childcare, it's hard to work. So investing in affordable care options could unlock a huge pool of talent and boost economic participation.
You're right. And it's not just about economics. It's about social equity, making sure everyone has a chance to work and contribute regardless of their caregiving responsibilities. But even with the best training programs and support, there's one big issue that could affect the workforce: automation.
Oh, right. The robots. That's a big one. What do the sources say about how a new administration might address that?
Well, one perspective is that automation is inevitable. And instead of resisting it, we should embrace it and focus on preparing workers for the jobs of the future. So investing in education and training that focuses on skills that are hard to automate. Creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, things like that.
It's about shifting the focus from jobs that machines can do to jobs that require human skills.
And another idea that's out there is a universal basic income. It's the idea of giving everyone a guaranteed minimum income to help with the potential job losses from automation. It's a controversial idea, but it's a conversation we need to have as automation becomes more common.
It's a big idea, and it just shows that we need to be creative and think outside the box when it comes to the challenges of the 21st century economy. But as we talk about automation and the future of work, let's not forget that technology is just one piece of the puzzle.
Right. The decisions made by policymakers, business leaders, and individuals, they all shape the economic landscape.
Absolutely. And one area where individual choices can have a big impact is personal finance. With inflation and economic uncertainty, it's more important than ever for people to be financially savvy.
Definitely. It's about taking control of your finances. Budgeting, saving, making good decisions about investing and debt.
And one source suggests a new administration could consider policies aimed at promoting financial literacy, maybe incorporating financial education into schools or offering tax incentives for people who save for retirement.
That's a good idea. Giving people the knowledge to make good financial decisions, it can have a positive effect on the whole economy.
Right. Greater financial security, less debt, more resilient workforce.
Precisely. It's about empowering individuals. But I think it's helpful to step back and look at the bigger picture. What are the overarching themes here?
Yeah, sometimes we get lost in the details. What connects all these economic challenges and strategies?
I think it comes down to adaptability, resilience, and embracing change. The world is changing fast, and the economy is changing with it. We need to be adaptable, willing to learn new skills, embrace new technologies, and be creative.
That's a great point. It's not about being afraid of the future. It's about being proactive. And that's why conversations like this are so important. They help us understand the issues so we can make informed decisions about the future of our country.
Well said.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. Remember, this isn't just about numbers. It's about people, communities, and creating a better future for everyone.
Absolutely. And on that note, let's talk about global finance.
Oh yeah, that's where things get really interesting. We've talked about the US dollar, but the world is changing. New players are emerging. Tell me more.
Well, the source material specifically mentions the rise of, well, alternative financial systems, like China's digital yuan. This digital currency, backed by the Chinese government, is becoming more popular in international transactions, and it could challenge the US dollar's dominance.
So we're witnessing a major shift in the global financial landscape. How could a new administration deal with this?
One approach discussed is for the US to strengthen its own digital and financial infrastructure. Maybe even create a US digital dollar. It's like a digital arms race.
A digital dollar. That sounds futuristic. But it's not just about technology, is it? It's about maintaining trust in the global financial system.
Exactly. The US dollar has been the world's reserve currency for decades because the American economy is seen as stable and trustworthy. To keep that position, a new administration would need to focus on strengthening institutions, promoting transparency, and demonstrating a commitment to responsible economic policies.
It's about reinforcing the foundations of the US dollar, but it's also about adapting and embracing innovation in finance.
Right. And that includes looking into technologies like blockchain and cryptocurrencies. They have the potential to completely change how we think about money and finance. A new administration would need to balance fostering innovation with protecting consumers, making sure these new technologies are used responsibly.
It's a balancing act, for sure. But as we dig into these global financial dynamics, I think it's important to zoom out and remember the human element. We're talking about policies, strategies, but these things impact real people.
You're right, we can't lose sight of that. Economic policy is about creating opportunities, ensuring fairness, and helping everyone thrive.
Very well said. I think that's a good place to take a break. We've covered a lot, but there's more to come. Join us in part 3 as we continue to explore the American economy and the future that lies ahead.
Welcome back. We're in the thick of it now, exploring the potential economic landscape a hypothetical new Trump administration might face. Remember, hypothetical. Before we move on, it's worth revisiting a key piece of that puzzle: the strength of the US dollar. It's not just numbers. It has a real impact on American businesses and consumers.
Yeah, currencies can seem abstract, but like you said, a strong dollar makes American-made products pricier overseas, hurting our companies trying to compete globally. And a weak dollar can lead to inflation here at home, making those imported goods we rely on more expensive.
Right. It's a delicate balancing act. And a new administration might need to think outside the box. One idea that came up is using targeted tariffs, not to protect domestic industries, but as leverage to influence currency valuations. Almost like a nudge, trying to gently guide the dollar in a direction that helps both businesses and consumers.
So using tariffs strategically to manage the currency, not just trade. That's interesting. It highlights how interconnected all these economic factors are. Speaking of interconnectedness, let's shift to another challenging area: balancing national security interests with economic realities.
Yes, the sources point to a potential shift towards a more assertive approach to addressing China's economic and military rise. It's about recognizing that national security and economic policy are deeply intertwined.
So economic strength equals national security.
In a way, yes. And one strategy suggested is reducing our dependence on China for things like pharmaceuticals and semiconductors. Remember those supply chain vulnerabilities we talked about? Well, this ties directly in. Incentivizing domestic production of those essentials would make us less reliant on China.
Diversifying, spreading the risk. Makes sense. But disentangling ourselves from China, especially in industries heavily reliant on their manufacturing, seems incredibly difficult. Where do you even start?
It wouldn't be easy. The sources suggest exploring new trade partnerships, particularly with allies in Asia and Europe, like building new bridges to connect with other economies, creating alternative pathways for trade and collaboration. For example, strengthening ties with India, a rising economic power, could open up new markets for American goods and reduce that dependence on China.
A strategic shift, moving away from a China-centric approach to a more diversified global network. It makes sense, but while we're strategizing about the future, we can't ignore the immediate challenge impacting Americans every day: inflation.
Absolutely. And there's a suggestion that a potential new Trump administration might favor a more hands-on approach to fighting inflation, going beyond the Federal Reserve's typical reliance on interest rate hikes.
So a more interventionist approach. What would that look like? What kind of strategies are we talking about?
One idea is targeted tax relief, specifically for middle and lower income families. This could help with the rising cost of living without necessarily pushing inflation higher overall. It's about providing relief where it's needed most without overheating the economy.
Right. Too much stimulus could backfire and actually worsen inflation. It's about finding that sweet spot.
Yeah.
But what about energy? We were just talked about the shift toward cleaner sources, and energy prices are a big driver of inflation. How does that fit in?
Energy is a critical piece of the puzzle. The sources suggest a potential two-pronged approach, expanding domestic production of oil and natural gas in the short term, while also investing in specific renewable energy projects. It's about stabilizing energy costs now, while also building a cleaner energy future.
It's a bridge between the present and the future. We can't just switch to 100% renewables overnight. We need a practical strategy that meets our needs today while still working towards a cleaner, more sustainable tomorrow.
Exactly. Building a more resilient energy system, one that can handle price shocks and supply disruptions while reducing our reliance on foreign energy. Plus, this investment in energy infrastructure could create jobs, boosting the economy, and helping to address that national debt we keep talking about.
Bringing us back to that economic chessboard. So how could this dual energy strategy help with the national debt?
Increased domestic energy production could mean more revenue for the government from things like leases, royalties, taxes, and that could help offset spending. Also, investing in renewable energy technologies could attract private investment, create new industries, and boost economic growth and tax revenue.
So potentially more energy independence, a cleaner energy future, and a stronger economic foundation to tackle that national debt. A triple win.
But we've been talking a lot about these big strategies, and I think it's important to connect it to everyday Americans.
Absolutely. It all boils down to the labor market. We've talked about the labor shortage, investing in the American workforce, but what does that really mean for workers and their families? Exactly. Because policies and strategies are one thing, but how do they impact people's lives, their jobs, their ability to put food on the table?
One idea that keeps coming up is strengthening vocational training and apprenticeship programs. These programs offer hands-on training in high-demand trades, equipping workers with the skills they need to land good-paying jobs, even without a 4-year college degree.
It's about providing different paths to success, acknowledging that college isn't for everyone. And there are plenty of great careers that don't require a traditional degree.
Exactly. And these programs could be tailored to fit the needs of specific industries and regions. For example, in areas hit hard by losses in manufacturing jobs, maybe programs focused on retraining those workers for jobs in, say, renewable energy or advanced manufacturing.
It's about adapting to the changing economy, making sure workers have the tools they need to transition and succeed.
Precisely. And another idea is expanding access to affordable childcare and elder care. These are often huge barriers for people, especially women, who are trying to work.
Right, childcare costs can be a huge burden. Investing in affordable care options could unleash a wave of talent and boost economic participation.
It's not just about economics, it's about fairness, making sure everyone has the opportunity to work and contribute, regardless of their caregiving responsibilities. But even with the best training and support systems, there's one big factor that could impact the workforce: automation.
Yes. The robots. How do the sources address that?
Well, one perspective is that automation is inevitable. Instead of fighting it, we should embrace it and focus on preparing workers for the jobs of the future, investing in education and training that focuses on skills that are hard for machines to replicate, like creativity, problem solving, and critical thinking.
It's about focusing on those uniquely human skills.
Exactly. Another idea that's out there is a universal basic income. The idea of giving everyone a guaranteed minimum income to help with potential job displacement from automation. It's controversial, but it's a conversation worth having as automation becomes more widespread.
It's a big idea, that's for sure. It shows we need to think creatively about the challenges of the 21st century economy. But technology is just one factor.
Right, decisions made by policymakers, business leaders, and individuals all shape the economic landscape.
True. And one area where individual choices can have a big impact is personal finance. With inflation and economic uncertainty, it's more important than ever for people to be financially savvy.
It's about taking control of your finances, budgeting, saving, making smart decisions about investing and debt.
And one source suggested that a new administration could look at policies that encourage financial literacy, maybe including financial education in schools or tax breaks for those saving for retirement.
It's a great idea. Giving people the knowledge and tools to make sound financial decisions can have a ripple effect across the economy.
Right. Greater financial security, reduced debt, a more resilient workforce. It's a win-win.
Exactly, empowering individuals. But I think it's important to step back and look at the big picture. What are the big themes connecting all these challenges and potential solutions?
It's easy to get caught up in the details. What ties it all together?
I think it comes down to adaptability, resilience, and embracing change. The world is changing at an incredible pace, and the economy is changing with it. To succeed in this new landscape, we need to be adaptable, willing to learn new skills, embrace new technologies, and be creative in our problem solving.
That's a great point. It's not about fearing the future. It's about shaping it. And that's why these conversations are so important. They give us the knowledge and understanding we need to make informed decisions about the direction of our country.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. Remember, this isn't just about numbers and charts. It's about people, communities, and build a better future for everyone.
Well said. And speaking of a better future, let's talk about global finance.
Yes, this is where things get even more interesting. We've discussed the US dollar, but the world is evolving. New players are challenging the established order.
It sounds like a major shift in the global financial landscape. How might a new administration deal with this?
One approach that's been discussed is for the U.S. to strengthen its own digital and financial infrastructure, perhaps even exploring the creation of a U.S. digital dollar. It's like a digital arms race, with countries vying for dominance in the virtual world.
A digital dollar. That sounds like science fiction, but it's becoming a reality. But it's not just about the technology, right? It's also about maintaining trust and stability in the global financial system.
You're absolutely right. The US dollar has held its position as the world's reserve currency for so long because of the stability and trustworthiness of the American economy and its institutions. To maintain that position, a new administration would need to focus on strengthening those institutions, promoting transparency and accountability, and showing a real commitment to responsible economic policies.
It's about reinforcing those foundations of the US dollar, but it's also about adapting to this changing landscape and embracing innovation in finance.
Exactly. That includes exploring new technologies like blockchain and cryptocurrencies, which have the potential to revolutionize the way we think about money and finance. A new administration would need to strike a balance between fostering innovation and protecting consumers, ensuring these new technologies are used responsibly and don't destabilize the financial system.
It's a delicate balancing act. But as we dive into these global financial dynamics, it's important to remember the human element. We're talking about policies, strategies, economic indicators, but behind all those numbers are real people, workers, families, businesses trying to navigate these complex realities.
You're absolutely right. That's something we should always keep in mind. Economic policy isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about creating opportunities, ensuring fairness, and fostering an environment where everyone has a chance to thrive.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time for another break. We've covered so much, but there's still more to explore. Join us for the final part of this deep dive as we wrap up our exploration of the American economy and the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from trade wars to energy policy, but now I think it's time to zoom in a bit.
Yes, let's shift our focus from the big picture to the impact on individuals and communities across America.
Exactly, because ultimately it's about how those big economic strategies affect everyday Americans, right?
Absolutely. And one of the most pressing issues for families right now is the cost of living, especially housing.
Yeah, it's a crisis in many parts of the country. Wages just haven't kept up with those skyrocketing housing costs. It's getting really hard for people to afford to live where they work.
It is. And it's forcing people to move further away from jobs and opportunities. So what can be done about it?
Well, what are some of the ideas being floated to tackle this housing crunch?
One that's gaining traction is increasing the supply of affordable housing. Things like tax incentives for developers to build more affordable units, maybe streamlining those zoning regulations to make it easier to build multifamily housing, and of course, investing in public housing programs.
So more options, more homes at different price points to meet the needs of everyone. But it's not just about building new housing, is it?
No, it's also about making existing housing more affordable. One source suggests exploring things like rent control, which would limit how much landlords can increase rent, or expanding those housing voucher programs, which give financial help to low-income families to afford decent housing.
These are all good ideas, but they can be tough to implement. Rent control, for example, it could discourage new housing development. And those voucher programs can be expensive and complicated to manage. Tough problem, no easy answers.
You're right. It's a complex issue, and it shows how important it is to be creative, to be willing to compromise, to find solutions that work for everyone. But we can't talk about housing affordability without talking about economic inequality.
Yeah, because even if we build more affordable housing, if wages stay flat and that gap between the rich and poor keeps growing, the problem's not going away.
Exactly. The sources emphasize the need to address inequality on multiple fronts. So things like raising the minimum wage, making it easier for workers to join unions, making sure everyone has access to healthcare and education, and changing the tax code so it's more progressive.
These are all big issues that have been debated for a long time. But one thing that seems to have pretty broad support is investing in infrastructure.
Definitely. The sources highlight the potential for big investments in things like roads, bridges, airports, broadband internet, you name it. And that would not only create jobs and boost the economy right away, but also set us up for long-term economic growth.
It's like building a strong foundation, connecting communities, and creating opportunities for businesses to grow.
Yep.
But it's not just about physical infrastructure. We need to invest in human capital too.
Absolutely. And that means investing in education and job training programs, making sure Americans have the skills they need for the 21st century economy. Things like expanding access to early childhood education, making college more affordable, and providing retraining for workers who've lost their jobs because of automation or globalization.
It's about building a workforce that's adaptable, innovative, and ready for anything. But, talking about the future, it's exciting, but also a little scary, right?
Yeah, I get that. There's a lot of uncertainty. But the important thing to remember is that we have a say in what the future looks like. It's not set in stone.
Right. It's shaped by the choices we make, the policies we put in place, and the conversations we have. And that's why deep dives like this are so crucial.
They give us the knowledge and understanding we need to participate in those conversations to make informed decisions about the direction of our country. And on that note, I want to thank all of our listeners for joining us on this journey.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. We've explored a lot of complex issues, and hopefully we've given you a better understanding of the economic landscape and what might lie ahead. Remember, it's not just about numbers, it's about people, communities, and creating a better future for everyone.
So stay informed, stay engaged, and keep those conversations going because the future of the American economy is in our hands.
And that's a wrap on this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.